Welcome to Linking into Sales. You go ahead.
Well, then you already stole my thunder.
Continue, Greg.
So, all right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to episode 70 of the Linking into Sales Social Selling Podcast. And when you search for Social Selling Podcast on Google, you will find us at the top of the list. But what we really would love to have is your reviews on the show. So make sure you head out to iTunes, at the Stitcher, wherever you're listening to the podcast, and please leave us your critical review of our show. And don't even need 4, 5, 11 million star ratings, just your review. And if you do review us, we'll make sure we mentioned you on the podcast. Now, what's awesome about today is that we are joined by a special guest. Actually, we have two guests, but we have someone who's going to be joining us here on the show, probably on a regular basis.
That's our hope.
And this is Elise Archer.
Hello.
Hey. And if
you all voted yes in the last promo.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you.
So if you saw the promo video out there about the sales leads Generation Secrets Conference, it's a long, enormous name. So you would have seen the video that we're actually going to be speaking tomorrow on September 1st about social selling to a fun crowd of people over at the McKimmon Center at NC State. But Elise, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And our other special guest.
Yeah. So and before we get there, we have a couple things. We have a couple brand new posts that are up on the blog regarding a couple things about one in particular about LinkedIn. But Martin had this fantastic article that he had written and researched and quoted a lot of great people in there. But he had actually defining what is social selling. So sometimes we need to go back and have that reminder about what social selling is, kind of how it's evolving, how the enterprise is adopting it as well. Martin lays out a lot of great research inside that post. The other post that we had is that it kind of talks about a story about an update that LinkedIn had quietly put out there that they didn't really bother telling anybody. And that is that actually we've taught this. We wrote this in the book that we have up on Amazon that we don't want you to buy because it's out of date. That basically before, when you were a member of a group, you could message anybody regardless of relationship inside of that group. But unfortunately, that's been changed. Back in June, actually, LinkedIn put out an update quietly, didn't really announce it, just kind of put it out there in the help section that now you can only reach 15 people per month across all groups. So you have a 15-person limit that you can actually send a message to if you're not directly connected to them as a level 1 connection. So make sure you're using those sparingly. But I gave an interesting perspective on why LinkedIn is actually making this approach. And when you kind of think about it, maybe you can, if you agree with this approach,
I do.
LinkedIn is pushing social selling heavily
versus just blind interruption.
Exactly. And the traditional sales approach of cold calling or cold emailing and hammering away and trying to boil the ocean, just not going to work. What was that?
Yeah. That's my that's a pray and spray to marketing here.
You do that like nobody else.
Thank you.
And if you're listening on the audio, please come back and watch the video on YouTube.
His hands are throwing up there.
But anyways, so I gave a kind of interesting perspective on this. I think you should check it out, and then give us your opinion back on it.
Great. All right. And our big event today.
So we have a guest with us today from PeopleLinx. He's the CMO at PeopleLinx. This is Michael. I didn't say your last name 3 times, so I'm going to have you say it.
Yeah. You want to get it correct.
Idinopoulos is the last name.
Idinopoulos.
There we go.
Got it. Okay. So
well, it's like Beetlejuice. Say it too many times.
Yeah, that's right. Whoa, there he is. Someone got it.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. We've had a couple of conversations, I think, over Twitter DM, which, by the way, if folks haven't noticed, you can do unlimited text length inside Twitter DMs. Same goes for group messaging, so that's kind of a big bonus there. But actually, you guys have put up a post, and this kind of sparked up this conversation because I looked at the post and then the post wasn't there. But we won't talk about that today.
Future ones.
But we may talk about that in the future as that develops. But that's how our conversation got started. It was on Twitter, and we wanted to bring you on because I think you guys provide a pretty interesting tool that I want you to tell us more about. And also, let's talk about how what you guys are seeing as far as social selling adoption among B2B enterprises, which I think a lot of folks would be very interested in.
And results.
Too. Yeah.
You've got some great stats on results. So, Michael, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys. Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of the podcast, and Obviously, a big fan of your Twitter handle as well. So it's a pleasure to be talking with you. So yeah, let me give you just a quick background on PeopleLinx, who we are and what we do. We are a social selling tool, a sort of a guided selling tool. We have technology that automatically recommends sales reps on what they should do next as far as ways to engage their buyers across a range of channels: LinkedIn, Twitter, even email. We'll automatically ping a rep when it's time to connect to a buyer on LinkedIn, when it's time to respond to a tweet from a buyer, when it's time to shoot an email to a buyer because an opportunity maybe is going cold. We integrate with CRM to be able to gather intelligence on what a sales rep's next best move is to engage their buyers, and then we turn it into action by prompting the rep. It's a great way to do sort of automated follow-up and reinforcement of a lot of the same principles that you guys are out evangelizing for and training on every day.
Very cool. And I imagine that salespeople probably really appreciate this, because they have enough that they're doing during the day. They don't need to think about, what tweet do I need to send, or what email do I need to send. It sounds like having a tool like this really streamlines the process for them.
Exactly right.
Does it take data as well and kind of look at best practices from previous engagements?
Absolutely. So that's part of the platform that we built. Pulls in data from a bunch of different sources, including CRM and social networks, to the extent that we can get our hands on that data. Although, as you guys well know, that's kind of a work in progress as far as access to social networking data. So we pull in all that data, and then we run it through a predictive analytics engine to be able to determine what are the actions that a rep ought to take based on what has been shown to be most successful in engaging their buyers.
The predictive analytics engine, could you just mention that a little more? Because there's so much exciting, what I call soft AI, we're seeing now moving into the social selling front.
Absolutely. So, a lot of the predictive analytics that we see is in the area of lead scoring, which I think is an interesting area, but it's kind of different from what we do. So what we're focused on specifically is recommending the right actions for the sales professional to take. And we think that's critically important, because we believe that at the end of the day, B2B sales is all about the relationship between the salesperson and the buyer. You can't automate that away. You can't get rid of the sales rep, certainly not in big ticket B2B transactions. So rather than take the rep out of the equation, we're trying to use the technology and data and analytics to empower the rep by automatically recommending to the rep actions that they can take that will further the sales cycle. And that's how we're using data. So we're basically looking at, we're looking at the Twitter stream, we're looking at CRM data, we're looking at best practices around how and when to connect to buyers on LinkedIn, how and when to share content one-to-one via email as well as on social networks. We're kind of sucking up all that data and then saying, okay, how do these actions correlate with successful sales outcomes? Deals won, deals advanced, stages reached, et cetera. And then based on all that, making recommendations that are associated with successful outcomes. But it's up to the rep to take the action, because we don't want to take the rep out of the picture.
Does this, so this seems to have some self-learning that occurs as it evolves working with the person.
Absolutely.
Is it a learning algorithm that evolves as they use it more? Is that
yes? Correct.
Wow, that's extremely exciting, because you're on the the sales journey with the customer, and now this could be helpful for someone who is not. It's important to know when are those touch points to begin along the journey, and to what degree and what level, and if you're in the school where you aren't accustomed to also doing it on the web and internet, it has a pretty steep learning curve for some people.
You got it. So we're really trying to do two things. Number one is provide a level of education for people who are not already far up that learning curve. And then number two, we're taking even the people who already know how to do this stuff, and just giving them gentle pings, gentle reminders, so that things don't fall through the cracks. Because we all know how easily opportunities can fall through the cracks.
It seems like it is just really taking social selling and making it almost intuitive for people. And that's one of the things that, we're talking about with our audience tomorrow is a lot of times salespeople are just, they walk in the morning, they're scratching their head, right? Like, what am I going to do today? Who am I going to connect with? Can you give an example of what it would look like when a salesperson logs into the system for that day? Would it have, okay, you need to email this person, you need to connect with this person on Twitter? Can you kind of give us a rundown of what that would look like and feel like for the actual salesperson?
Sure. So the way the way the system works is when the salesperson, when the salesperson turns on their computer in the morning, the first thing they get is usually a daily or almost daily email reminder. But again, it's in email, so they don't need to log into our system. They get the email reminder that says, hey, here's a piece of content that you should be sharing. Or, hey, here's someone you should be connecting with on LinkedIn. And then they can click through to, in many cases, through to the underlying system. So, for example, we'll say, you're doing a deal with John Smith. It's reached demo stage. Now would be a good time to connect to John on LinkedIn. Click here to do it. And that will automatically take the rep into the screen in LinkedIn where they can complete the action and connect with John Smith.
Awesome. So how do you guys, or have you seen salespeople having an issue with trusting this kind of relationship or anything like that? Or maybe a better question would be, how's the adoption been?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, look, adoption is always challenging with salespeople. What we're finding is we're getting very good adoption rates. And the reason is that we're really positioning this as a tool for the rep. This is a tool that empowers the rep. It's not Big Brother. And it's not, it's not a compliance tool. It's not a tool that's going to be used to evaluate whether or not they're hitting their activity numbers. It's really designed to be a helper to the individual sales rep. And that's one of the reasons why we get good adoption. We've also gamified the whole experience, and that always helps. Obviously, salespeople are very competitive. So that aspect of the platform has been really popular as well, especially when we get leadership who is actively engaged in terms of recognizing and acknowledging and rewarding the people who are most active.
Awesome. Very good. All right. So as far as adoption's going, aside from your application, but what are you guys seeing as far as how organizations are picking up on social selling and how they're kind of rolling it out? Are they going at it by a team by team approach, or has management said, all right, fine, we're going to buy into this and let's just figure out how to measure it and go forward? Or what are you guys seeing as far as that goes?
Yeah, great question. So again, as you say, if you abstract away from the PeopleLinx experience and just look at the market as a whole, we actually did a pretty comprehensive survey at the beginning of the year of B2B salespeople in the U.S. And we discovered a lot of really interesting things. Probably the first and foremost headline we found was that salespeople get it. So in our survey results, we found that 73% of the respondents think that social has value for selling. But, and here's the really interesting thing, only 31% of them say it's part of their sales process. Mm-hmm. Wow. And so you've got a kind of what I would describe as a massive disconnect. On the one hand, 73% say, yes, I get it, I see the value. But then when you follow up and you say, so is it part of how you sell? Only 31% say it is.
So why, I'm curious, why is it that it's only 31% are saying it's actually part of how they sell? Is it sales management that's holding it back, or what do you think?
So I think the answer is yes, but there's a little more to the story than that. So when we dug in and understood a little bit more about what is the problem, what people told us was only 26% of B2B reps feel they know how to use social selling as part of their job. Right? Only 26% say, yeah, I know how to do this. Right? Which means the other 74% are kind of walking around saying, I'm not really sure I know what to do on these platforms. That's really going to help me in my job every day.
Very interesting.
I want to add something to it because I'm in the 55 age group, and what I've learned over this is that the transfer of social skills onto the web aren't automatic for my age group.
Yep.
That, if you told me what to do in front of a person, the average salesperson would have all the nuance and understanding. And even if the behavior is the same, they won't automatically transfer those skills to the web.
Yep.
And I'm giving examples in coaching people in this, often say, pretend it's not the web. What would you do in front of them? And then immediately they'll know.
Yep.
So have you seen that in your experience? I'm sure you have, probably in your coaching too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen that. Although it's interesting, the age demographics don't quite break out the way you might expect them to. We actually saw a little bit of an inverse bell curve with respect to age. So we saw, your millennials using a lot of social selling, and then your kind of 50, 55 and over using a lot of social selling. The dip actually seems to be more in the middle. It's more people in their 30s and 40s who seem to be relying on it less. So We're definitely seeing an element of that. But I think, I think a lot of people tend to write off that older generation prematurely. I think they're probably a little bit more sophisticated than we give them credit for.
Well, we're also hungrier. Our boat didn't come in. Most of us aren't retiring. We know what it means to lose your house. I'm grounded in reality. And my love of a good salesperson is, I say they're like an Olympic athlete. A real salesperson goes, what does it take? Not, do I like it or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, to me, a behavioral thing. And at least in our age, people I work with, they go, I got to roll up my sleeves and do it. My opinion doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I love that in salespeople. So,
yeah.
Greg, you had a few more questions, I think.
Yeah, what you gonna?
Oh yeah.
Well, this resonates so much with me, Michael, because I'm coming from a world where very recently I was your target demographic, working as a B2B sales rep in a large digital marketing company. And I can, what you said about, was it 24% or 26% know what they're doing? 20. Yep. Okay, perfect. Yeah, and it's so true. We all wanted to be good at social selling, but we had very little direction as far as what to do. And the fact that you can't necessarily attach an immediate return on investment to what you're doing either is kind of disheartening. So yeah. I love what you're doing, because I think it's so empowering for salespeople who know they can be good at this and they want to be good at this and how important it is, but they just don't know the daily actions to take to do it. Yeah. Literally handing that to them on a platter.
And let's come back to that question of support and encouragement and enablement, because Greg, you asked that question before, is this a management failure? And I think the answer is partly yes. So part of what we did in the survey was we also asked people, what kind of help are you getting from your employer? Are you getting encouragement? Are you getting training? Are you being measured? Like, how much is this really part of what sales leadership is expecting of you and preparing you for? And what we found is the numbers are pretty low. So only 22% of B2B salespeople said that their employer encourages them to use social selling. Only 11% said that their employer offers training, and only 6% said their employer measures the use of social selling.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. So I think you got to look at that and say, okay, maybe some of this is on the individual rep, but clearly sales leadership, sales management has a role to play here too.
Well, I think some of it is the old thing. They group this as wasting time on Facebook with trivial information. And dialogue, and I think you'd mentioned what the management probably, at least from my years in IBM, is give them some hard statistics or results, and then they slowly start coming over. They want to see what are the numbers, and you've seen some of those. Any others you want to mention? But they're really starting to roll out of how, look, your customer's more informed than ever before. They're going to the web to learn before they do it. They're trying to pre-screen the salespeople to find out what they're up to, and you're either going to be there or your competition will be. Would you mention a little bit about that, what you're finding of results that are solid results showing the value of social selling?
Yeah, so there are kind of two ways to talk about that. At the individual anecdotal level, I think we all have, fantastic examples, right, of people who found opportunities through, often somewhat serendipitously, unexpectedly, through interactions that started or were continued on social media. So there's sort of all the great stories out there. In terms of hard numbers, what our analysis shows is if you really get this right, I mean, it can be a 10 to 15% productivity lift. And that has to do with, that's all about, how the extent to which social selling is able to either source or influence deals. I mean, here's a stat you guys will like, especially because of the amount of training that you do. When we ask people how many had recent business influenced by social, the people whose companies do not offer training, 38% of them told us that they had recent business, it was business within the last 3 months influenced by social, 38%. When you look at the people whose companies do offer training, that number jumps to 74%, right? So almost doubles. So clearly, even the people who aren't getting training and the people who maybe haven't gotten religion, even some of them are saying, yeah, I'm starting to see that. I mean, 38% is a non-trivial number who have had business influence recently by social. But as soon as you add that kind of organizational element and the training and the support and the encouragement from management, that number goes up to almost 3/4.
Wow. Yikes. Well, I guess then we need to see more organizations that are adopting social selling. I know a couple of folks who can train. So I was actually just checking out on the website. I noticed that you have a white paper that basically the folks can download that includes all the survey results.
Yep.
Called the State of Social Selling Report. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that link in the show notes.
Awesome.
We'll redirect them off linking into sales and into there, so you'll know that they came in from us. But I strongly suggest that folks go out and check out that survey. And if you think that People Links is a good tool that you should consider checking out for your sales organization, definitely talk with them. We just as a qualifier here, we definitely do like to bring on some very high quality guests, and I think every guest that we've had on so far has definitely met the bar that we have set for what we expect from our guests, and also the quality we want to provide back to our listeners as well. So, Michael, I greatly appreciate you coming on to the show today, and we hope to have you back on. I know we're going to have one of your counterparts there.
Yep.
Join us in a few weeks. I got to get that. We'll get that set up, and we'll get some digging into some real deep, meaty stuff of social selling, which I'm sure everyone will enjoy too. So.
Yeah, and Michael, is there anything you would like to close with, or comments, or anything you think that we didn't cover you'd like to make sure that's mentioned?
Oh, I think we hit all the big stuff. The only closing thought is. I firmly believe that social selling is, this is inevitable. This is a wave that you just can't stop. And if you go back and you look at the introduction of any new communication channel, it goes all the way back to the telephone. When the telephone first came out, I'm sure you guys, Martin, I see you nodding. I mean, when the telephone first came out, salespeople were saying, I don't understand why I would need a telephone to sell. I do all the selling I need to do by meeting with my customers. Why would I want to use this gadget to talk to them without seeing them? And then, email, same thing. Faxes, same thing. I think this is just the next communication channel. It's going to happen. The question is just who's going to win, who's going to lose, and how quickly are the winners going to pull ahead?
Excellent. Great closing comment. And we'll wrap up. Greg, we're getting good show notes in, Look for those and information. This has been so terrific to have you on the show, and thanks for your generosity of time and information. And really looking forward to hearing more about how the wonderful ways People Link is helping sales professionals build those long-term relationships.
Great, Greg, Martin, Elisa, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure and an honor.
Well, this has been Linking into Sales.
Yeah, your social selling podcast. Don't forget to check us out on Twitter, LinkedIn. Come in and join our LinkedIn group. Follow our company page. We got a Facebook page you can like, and Google Plus as well.
And it's Martin Brossman.
Martin Brossman.
Elise Archer.
Yeah. Great. So you're being Michael. You're on the first show with Elisa officially on now. So
that means I've been upstaged.
It was great. Great. Well, take care, everyone. Terrific.
Thanks, gang. Take care.
Cool. Thank you.